Well, good morning, everyone. I hope everybody's doing well. We're glad to have you join us for our second virtual AGC workshop. Of course, we originally were supposed to be in Asheville back in March. Obviously, that didn't happen. We couldn't make that happen due to COVID. So hopefully everyone's healthy. We had our first one yesterday, went pretty well. Only one or two little minor things we had to sort through, but we got those straightened out, and hopefully today will be just as good. So, but just wanted to give you a few important announcements before we get started. Today's session will cover contract administration topics and also give you an update on our e-ticketing process. I think I forgot to introduce myself. Anyway, I'm Brian Skeens, Assistant State Construction Engineer for the Western Region. So, but anyway, hopefully on your screen somewhere you see a control panel, or you see maybe a little orange arrow. If you click on that arrow, it should open your control panel. And there you will find a area where you can type in your questions if you have questions. Wiley Jones and myself will be monitoring those questions throughout the webinar. Also, you can raise your hand if you would like to be recognized to ask a question. We will unmute you and allow you to ask the question. Also, you will see an announcements. You should see an announcements section. And in that announcement section, there should be a link to a sign-in sheet. If you can access that, please click on that link and sign in. That way we can keep track of who all is attending. If you do not see that, you should see in the handout section a document that says important links. And the link to the sign-in sheet is also in that document. Also in that handout section are other documents that will be referenced during the presentation, as well as a copy of the PowerPoint. So at the end, when we get finished, you will be prompted to complete a survey. If you are interested in getting PDHs, we do have 1.5 PDH hours for this section. And if you complete all three AGC and NCDOT workshops, you will end up with 5 PDH hours, I believe. So, Wiley or Brian Edwards, did I cover everything pertinent?
I think so. Good job. I don't have anything else to add there.
We do want to just encourage communication today. I mean, just like we would be if we were in Asheville. If you have questions, please respond. So
please don't hesitate to type those in or raise your hand. Yeah, just because we're virtual, we still want interaction. We still want you to participate as best as you can. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Victor Barber to give a few opening comments.
Thanks, Brian. I just cut my camera on so everybody can see my pretty face. I know that'll be the highlight of everybody's day. But anyway, again, I want to welcome everybody. We greatly appreciate NCDOT pulling this thing together with technology. As I told the group yesterday, I don't know about the rest of the folks, but back in March, I didn't even know what the hell Zoom, GoToMeeting, or Teams was, but I learned a lot about that stuff. I can sign on now, but they won't let me run the controls any, so therefore there's a trust issue, which I don't blame them for that. I want to reiterate what Brian said about the communication. Even though it is different, please communicate. Please ask your questions. No such thing as a dumb question. So please do that, because interaction is the key to success of these things, I think. Just a couple of updates for contractor members. The bond sale that NCDOT is working on for $700 million appears to be moving forward. It looks like if everything goes well, they'll be sold November 12th. So that'll really help out DOT's finances. I think they're coming out of the hole now, but this extra $700 million will definitely help speed that process up. So that's a really good thing. On our committees front, there's a couple of special work groups that we're working with or forming with DOT to look at a couple of issues that I think are near and dear to most of us contractors and DOT folks as well. First one is related to utility relocation, trying to work on things and ideas of how we can get better communication and efforts from particularly dry utilities to get their stuff in a timely manner. And then the other one will be with railroad communication, railroad coordination stuff, particularly as it relates to flaggers. There's a shortage of flaggers and there's a need for more flaggers. So that has created some issues on projects. And I'm sure y'all have seen, I've sent around some stuff related to additional requirements for flaggers. It appears even on resurfacing projects, flaggers and railroad insurance will be required. So we're going to work on those things to see if we can come up with some ideas to get better coordination, communication with those folks. So we think that will be a really good thing, and we appreciate the efforts of the DOT to get those things set up. I think I'll close again, just to remind everybody, please communicate. Please raise your hand, type a question, do whatever you need to do to communicate whatever your question is. No such thing as a dumb question. And I guess, Brian, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Victor, for that update. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle Gaddy. She's going to be leading our contract administration discussion. Go ahead, Michelle.
Good morning, everyone. Appreciate everybody joining us today. For those who don't know me, I'm Michelle Gaddy, the state construction operations engineer. And I'm going to go ahead and start things off with the contract administration section. What are we going to talk about today? We're going to start off with talking about communication, because of course that's critical with everything we do. Look at partial pay estimates and how you can get a copy of your estimate. Subcontract approval forms, Davis-Bacon Act, certified payroll, subcontractor payment tracking, joint checks. Talk a little bit about the FHWA 1391, Title VI posters, project closeout, e-ticketing, and then we'll see if there's time for letting website updates and electronic pay records. How do we communicate? We all communicate a number of different ways, and what one person may say, another person may hear something completely different. When we feel like it's critical that in all of our communications, we make sure everybody's on the same page. You can see that there's a number of different ways on maybe how the customer explains something and how it's supported, or what the customer really needs, or possibly even how somebody understands it. Biggest thing is that we're all on the same page, and that maybe one person is talking about building a tire swing and another person's talking about building a roller coaster. Need to make sure we're all communicating with one another and that we understand what the other is trying, the points that the other party is trying to get across. That's critical with supplemental agreement, claim discussions, everything that we do in order to get our project delivered in a timely manner. Communications, make sure you're keeping up with critical topics of conversation during your meetings and project visits. Whatever you do, don't wait until an issue blows up. It always becomes far more critical once it hits that mass point, and then we all are scrambling in order to try to solve the problems. So much better when we can get all the parties involved and make sure we have the discussions as soon as we know about an issue. Make sure you're meeting in person when solutions are needed. Identify the problems and develop solutions. Keep the project moving. Make sure you've got the right parties at the table to have the conversations, whether or not you need an internal group to NCDOT to help talk about design criteria, whether or not you need a third party to be involved, whether that's a municipality or maybe a third party utility that needs to be involved in the discussion. But make sure the correct parties are at the table in order to be able to come up with solutions. And if someone is critical to the conversation, they've got to be there. They've got to help make the decisions that are needed. Whenever you make a decision, make sure you're taking ownership of it. And whatever we do, make sure we're working together as a team to ensure that all parties have resolution. Make sure you're talking about the same items and the same solutions. So partial pay estimates. We've heard from a number of contractors that they're missing getting a copy of the paid estimate upon payment. And in the past, construction unit always printed off a copy whenever we approved an estimate for payment, and we took that copy up to fiscal. Of course, with COVID, There are far fewer folks in the office. We're having to adapt in our procedures as we're doing it, and estimates are no longer being printed. So we've heard from contractors that they're missing that option. So we wanted to come up with a solution that you're still able to get your estimate. You're able to go to our website and get a copy of the estimate that you would have received upon payment. So how do you get it? If you go to the Connect website, connect.ncdot.gov, click on Projects, Construction, Contract Payment Report. You can also just do Contract Payment Report in the search window, and it should take you to the link as well. And this actually shows the website and the buttons, or the projects, the construction, and where the report would be on the website. From there, you're going to be taken to this blue screen that says Estimate Report. And it should be noted, this report has always been out there and available for you. But when you went here, you actually got what we called a copy of the fiscal report. It looked different. It was by our WBSs, which WBS, for anyone who doesn't know, that's kind of our funding source. And some projects may have multiple funding sources. So if you printed off that, you would see only the quantities relative to that particular funding source. It's a little cumbersome to go through because you may have to look at multiple sheets. We decided to upgrade the site so that you now get a copy of what we call the Contractors Report, which summarizes all the quantities that a contractor has been paid by the line item. Once you get to this blue screen, you'll enter your contract number. If you want to see when the estimate was paid, you can click on Get Paid Date, and it would actually tell you when the estimate was paid. Get Report will allow you to download a copy of the report. You'll see down there at the bottom, it shows, what do you want to do with it? Do you want to open it, save it? You can save it for your records, open it, view it, do as you need with it. This is the actual copy of an estimate. And again, you'll note that it's the contractor's copy of the estimate. And this is what you were mailed when an estimate was paid. It is signed by the state construction engineer. So this is an official copy of the estimate. You can only get your most recent estimate, though. Will only allow you to pull the last estimate paid. And as I mentioned earlier, you can save this for your records. So it does provide you an opportunity to download it, save it electronically. Why are we going this way instead of continuing to save or to send you a copy? One, we feel like we're getting more updated with the times, and we're all saving things electronically now. So this provides you a way of getting an electronic copy, saving it to your hard drive, wherever you may store your files, but you no longer have to worry about where a paper copy is. For the state, it also saves us the cost printing off all these estimates every day. There was a cost in paper, toner, keeping everything going, and it brings us into the 21st century, frankly. So we feel like this is a better way of getting your information out to you. Does anyone have questions on what I've covered so far? All right, I'm going to keep going. The subcontract approval form. It's the easiest thing you've ever filled out, right? We understand that there's a lot of questions that come from it, so we just kind of want to quickly touch on it. The subcontractor unit price. That is the value of work as compared to the contract unit bid price. In other words, what did the prime contractor bid for that line item? If a sub is doing 100% of the work associated with it, meaning they're doing every aspect of work, the subcontract unit price should reflect what the prime contractor bid on the line item. That's because they're doing the entire value of the work. And we utilize that information for tracking the minimum 40% of work that the prime contractor has to complete on the project. So we need the true value of the work. It doesn't matter if you aren't paying them that amount. This is contractual value. We do want to make that clear. We've heard some comments from contractors that feel like if they're putting a different price in there, then they're falsifying this document. It's not. That is the contractual value of the work between the prime and NCDOT. If it is a DBE, you are going to list the unit price you're actually paying the DBE in the DBE, MBE, WBE unit price field. all subcontracts that include a line item, and again, the DBE can be more or less than the subcontract unit price. But if you have a unit price, and say you bid $1 for a ton of asphalt, $1 should be shown in the subcontract unit price, because that's the value that NCDOT is paying the prime. You can pay them more or less there in the DBE field. If it's not a DBE, we don't request to know what you're paying that subcontractor. So you would not have to reflect it. But we do want to emphasize its contractual value of the work for subcontract unit price. If by chance you complete this form and upon review realize that some changes are needed, what can you do? We do have to have proof that all parties are in agreement with the changes. So if something needs to be redlined, scratched out, we do need initials showing that everybody is in agreement with it, and that'll include the prime as well as the sub. So if we have to make a minor change, and I do want to emphasize minor, we don't want a completely redline version of the SAF. That becomes busy, it becomes hard to figure out exactly what's going on. If you're having to start making major changes, you should resubmit the SAF. We do request a copy of the executed subcontract agreement. That's a minimum of 2 of them, or 10%, whichever is greater. So if you have more than 20 SAFs, you may have to submit, you will have to submit more than 2. You could have to submit 3, 4, whatever the 10% is. And that does include your second tier subcontracts as well. We may request actual copies of the subcontract agreement if additional information is needed on any particular sub as well. We do have the right to do that. So portion versus partial. Portion is, we're talking about the quantity. Is it a small quantity? Is it a large quantity? It's the same scope of work, just a different quantity. Partial is, you're talking about scope based. And that is if you are doing a certain aspect of a line item. The most common one we see is hauling, where you're just hauling the asphalt to the job site. You're not placing it, compacting it, not doing anything with it. It's just bringing the asphalt, and it's one particular scope of the line item. So depending on whether or not you're doing quantity based or scope based, you need to make sure you're notarizing whether or not it's a portion or partial. Now, if it's a portion, the quantity will reflect that it's just a portion of the total quantity. If it is a partial, we do ask that you include what part of the work they're going to be doing in the line item description. So if it's hauling, you just hauling asphalt. If it's maybe it's tying steel, or building inverts for a precast box, whatever you've got the sub doing, if you can note, or make sure you make note so we know what it is. Should also note, if by chance you have a number of different subcontractors performing partials on the project, their subcontract unit prices can't total more than what you bid on the project. Again, we're tracking everything based on the unit price you bid with NCDOT. So those prices can't exceed what you bid on them. So you need to keep that in mind as you're completing all of your SAFs. There is a new form that came out, so please make sure you're utilizing the most updated form. It was in April of 2019, so it's been out for almost a year and a half now. Do want to note that the SAF requires that the certification of that you include the FHWA 1273 and Title VI language have physically been incorporated into all federal contracts at all tier levels. So that means it's been physically incorporated into your subcontract agreements with your first tier subs. The first tier subs have to include it in their certification, or they're certifying that they've included in their second tier subs, and so on down. If it is a state funded project, you must certify that the Title VI language has physically been incorporated into those contracts. We do require that all SAFs are submitted within 30 days of the date of availability, or 20% of contract time, whichever is graded. And that's because we're monitoring that 40% amount of work for the sub, but we also have to report all of our subcontracting data to our federal partners and our state partners. Sometimes legislative requests, whatnot. We've got to have a pretty good feel on who's being subcontracted on all of our projects. So 20% contract time we feel like is a reasonable time frame to get all the documentation in, and that lets us do the reporting that we need for all of our projects. We do require that the SAF form is submitted and approved by NCDOT prior to the subcontractor beginning work. Please keep that in mind as you're bringing in subs. It becomes a little bit of a time crunch when you've got a sub showing up and we don't have the SAF, and we have to verify that they're approved to do the work codes that they're coming out to do. They're approved vendor with us, and that everything looks good, that they're following through, if they're a committed DBE, that they've got all the work that they were committed to. But we do need these submitted in a timely manner. So give us a little bit of time before shooting it over to us and the sub actually showing up. As I mentioned, all subcontractors must be pre-qualified to perform the work. That means they've got to have all their pre-qualifications data into the unit, their approval back before they ever show up. We do occasionally have folks show up and we're scrambling at the last minute to find out if an application is in and if it's going to be approved and that sort of thing. That creates a time crunch again for us and for the prime contractor if they don't know if somebody can go to work. We did have a webinar back in May 2020 to kind of go over this with contractors. And if you have any questions about SAFs, I'd love to hear them.
We just had one question thus far. And again, please utilize the question tab on your control panel to ask any questions. But the question was the 40% completion by prime was mentioned. What's the process, if any, if this percentage is not met by the prime contractor? And I was explaining that we don't allow them to subcontract more than 35% because we truly want them to have skin in the game, if you will, but it could be reduced to 35% if you did have specialty line items associated with it.
Yeah, and for all DOT staff, we ask that you monitor that. Every time you approve a subcontract, the last one that you have approved, you can go into HiCams, and there is I'll get you the name of the button, but there's actually a button down, it's the rightmost one in the subcontract window that gives you all the stats of where the prime currently is as far as the percentage of work that they're doing. It automatically calculates all of your specialty percentages for that 35%. It's doing all the math for you and it'll spit it out. If your last approved subcontractor is showing that the percentage is nearing that 40% or 35%, including specialty items, you need to sit down and have a conversation with the contractor and find out if they realize they're getting near that percentage, how much more work they're anticipating subcontracting. But we need to have those discussions before they reach that threshold. So it's always good to monitor. And again, if you just look at the last one, if you click on the first one entered, it's going to give you the percentages of that as of that point. So you have to go down, click on the last one entered and approved, and it's going to give you the stats. We ask that you kind of keep an eye on that, particularly if you've got a lot of subcontracts that are being entered and high dollar values in comparison to your contract bid amount.
We had another question come in. We can only have one second-tier subcontractor, correct? And I don't believe that is the case. I think you can't have more than one second-tier subcontractor.
That is correct. You can have more than one, as long as the second-tier subcontractor is only allowed to do the work that the first-tier subcontractor has been subcontracted. So you can't add additional work that the first tier has not been given. But they can take the first tier can take the amount of work that they have and dole it out to multiple second-tier subs.
I think the clarification was only one second tier per subcontractor. So in other words, just a second tier subcontractor can't subcontract it to, say, a third or fourth tier.
We have allowed that. Contractors, we don't have the functionality in HiCams to track that. We have had some cases on some of our really big design build contracts in which we've had to allow a third tier subcontractor. HiCAMS does not allow the functionality for it to be entered. We have talked with the teams as we've gotten some of these really big projects, we've seen the need for it. But we do allow it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, so I was going to say each one should be, if it's a third tier or below, treat those, like Michelle said, on a case-by-case basis. So we've got a couple other questions here. Regarding partial designation, does the department view providing laydown, dumpsters, washing stations, etc., as reasoning for marking any item as partial? We have been viewing that these items fall under the mobilization item.
That could be, you still should document any subcontractor who's coming in to do work. If you have a second tier subcontractor who's coming in to do those line items, and they are kind of administrative, and I can see that could fall underneath the mobilization. We still should be getting a second tier, a subcontract for anybody who's coming in to perform work.
Yeah, and I think to further tie on to that is, those items, if they're being provided by someone else, then it could be looked at, but it should be part of that particular item, that subcontracted item, and not necessarily partial. What is the construction unit's recommendation action if the time frame to receive all SAFs for a project has expired and we have not received all the SAFs?
Go ahead and have a conversation with your subcontractor, with your prime contractor, on how many more SAFs they have. I'd point out that this is a contractual requirement that we receive all of our SAFs. We do realize occasionally things happen after the 20%, but there's really no reason why we can't go ahead and get all the known SAFs in. You may have changes to the SAFs that have already been submitted, and we understand that. You do have line items that may be added, deleted after the fact, and we can take revisions to ones we've already got, but we do want to go ahead and get all the SAFs in on the 20%, during the 20% time frame.
Yeah, I'd like to stress to our contractor partners to please get those submitted as quickly as possible, and that would help us to certainly monitor the things we need to monitor, but also to prevent any issues like as mentioned in that question. So we're relying on you to get those turned in as quickly as possible.
That's correct. Any other questions about SAFs?
I'm looking through them all.
If you think of any more, feel free to add them in. I'm going to go ahead and keep going.
All right.
Again, if you want to ask your question verbally, please just don't hesitate to raise your hand, and we'll make that available.
All right. Certified payrolls. Payrolls must be reviewed and submitted to the RE office on a weekly basis. That's actually what it requires. We do understand that we receive packages of payrolls on a monthly basis. Occasionally, it's easier for the prime to gather all of his subs stuff at one time, maybe during estimate prep time or at a specified time of the month. But we do have to be getting them on a regular basis. We will allow the monthly submittal, but we can't go multiple months without receiving certified payrolls. We need to be getting them at a minimum of a monthly basis. We can be taking them on a weekly basis. Our payrolls are subject to audits by FHWA, State Auditor's Office, as well as other internal NCDOT audits. Payrolls are reviewed by RE staff to ensure that the payroll is in compliance with wage rate decisions and DOT records. And by DOT records, I mean our diaries. We do document when primes, subcontractors, anybody on the project, we're documenting when they're there. And we're using that as a comparison to whether or not we've received all the payrolls of folks who are working. Subcontractor payrolls should be submitted through the prime contractor. And we are continuing to work on a process for electronic payrolls. Y'all may remember, probably 2 years ago during these workshops, we said it's coming, electronic process. We did get sidetracked a little bit and had to switch. The software we have is called Ashtoware, and we are also implementing the pre-construction section of Ashtoware. And we had to, due to some other software issues we had to focus in on the pre-construction side before implementing the civil rights side, which will have the payroll piece. It is coming. We're hoping within a year we'll be able to have a pilot program or a couple pilot programs for contractors to be able to try out submitting electronic payrolls before we get to the point where it becomes a requirement. And that would be for not only the prime, but all of our subcontractors. We feel like the electronic process is the process of the future, and we'll streamline this process, make it a whole lot easier for approvals versus getting the emails and the copies of the payrolls as we get them now. Certified payrolls are required for all subcontractors performing work. There are a couple of exceptions. Your professional services such as surveying, hauling, if the hauling is performed at an off-site commercial site. If the hauling is to a borrow pit or a waste site that is project specific, that is still considered on site, even if it's not right on the project site. It could be a couple miles down the road, but if it is exclusive to the project and not a commercial waste pit, you would still have to include certified payrolls for those haulers. A few other things on the certified payrolls, laborers and mechanics. They're actually referred to as equipment operators, but we think of our operators more as the folks who are actually on the pieces of equipment. But laborers and mechanics employed directly at the site of work must be paid prevailing wages in the contract. Superintendent, foreman, they must be shown on the certified payroll with an hourly rate if 20% of their time is spent performing duties as a laborer or mechanic. Meaning if they're spending more than 20% of their time performing functions other than supervisory roles, they can't just be labeled as a superintendent or foreman. Temporary employees must be shown on the contractor or staffing agency payroll. Bona fide trainees must provide documentation of enrollment in the OJT program, and employees must be classified according to the work performed on specific projects. Fringe benefits, such as their deductions that cannot be required by law, health or life insurance, any retirement plan, anything that a employee has the opportunity to opt into would be a fringe benefit. It is required that they're shown on the payroll as well. So what problems with payrolls are y'all seeing? We continue to hear that the records don't always match. DOT does actually keep track of the number of folks that folks bring in, and we label everybody as either a laborer, operator, or a foreman or supervisory role. So occasionally we see some slight differences in maybe the number of operators or laborers, but and that's fine. We realize that we're kind of capturing the data as we see the day go on, but it may change here or there. So we may see some slight differences, or we may show that a sub is on the site for 6 hours and your payroll may show 7. We don't expect to see vast differences. And by vast, I mean maybe our record's showing that you're on there for 12 hours, but the certified payroll only shows 2. Extreme differences. And we realize that there's some travel time in there on certified payrolls, so we do have some leeway, but we ought to be somewhere in the ballpark with the data we've got and what's being submitted on our payrolls. So I'd love to hear comments from contracting staff, DOT. What are the problems that we continue to see, and maybe let's talk about how we can kind of come to some resolution. Any questions, comments? Y'all have got it?
I'm not seeing anything new or seeing anybody with a hand raised, so
Okay.
I guess they've
Well,
got
you
it
did.
all.
Randy McKinney's got his hand raised.
We do. Let's find him here. Go ahead and unmute him, Wiley.
Randy, you should be able to talk.
I started to say you have a lot of power there to mute and unmute. Hey, Michelle, this is just kind of a general question. Say a payroll comes in and like you say, we show 8 hours and they show 10. I'm just picking a number.
Right.
Typically, and it's something I've told, and it may be wrong, but I've told like our office people to do is that we see a discrepancy. We usually send something to the contractor and say, there's a discrepancy. They send something back and they say, they were working in the yard or whatever they were doing. And there's no change in anything. That basically it's verified that we've seen there's a difference and the contractor said, well, the difference is explainable and we go on. Do we have to do that? Or is it okay to see that difference and go, well, that's probably okay because it's one event here. I mean, do we have to go through that exercise to document that we saw it, they've explained it, and we went on, or can we just say, well, that's kind of a common occurrence that there's an hour off here, an hour off there every now and then, and go on?
I think if you're talking about an hour here or there, that's easily explained by either prep time or travel time. A lot of our subs may be in a different county than the project is. You could have an hour commute either way.
Yes.
So I think as long as we're in the ballpark, that's fine. Like I said, we don't want to see extremes. We need to probably be careful. If a seating sub comes in and they come and go, we need to make sure our records don't necessarily show them being there all day. So we do ask that DOT kind of keep that in mind as you're documenting hours. If it is a short-term sub, make sure that's reflected in our diaries. And we realize sometimes it's an estimate, particularly if you've got multiple operations going on with only one inspector. It's hard to capture exact time frames for some of, especially the folks who aren't there all day. We do realize we do have those issues. So as long as it's in the ballpark, you feel like it's reasonable and can document it up, I wouldn't necessarily say you need to question every single one of those that are an hour or two off. It's going to be the vast differences where you're talking about half a day or more that really should be questioned.
Okay, that answers my question.
So Michelle,
Joe Bailey has a question. I'm trying to get him. Joe, you're self-muted, so if you want to unmute, ask your question. Go.
All right, my question is, I think I know the answer, but if a project crosses county lines and the counties have different pay rates, then you have to abide by each set of pay rates for each county, and you wouldn't have one overriding the other. Is that correct?
That is correct. If you cross county lines, you have to abide by whatever county you're looking in. Now, I have seen where the contractors kind of take that into consideration. They pick the higher rates of the two to cover themselves no matter where they're working, and that would be fine as long as they are making the minimum amount, the highest amount between the two. So that kind of covers you as far as making sure no matter where they're working, they are getting the applicable. But if you don't want to do that, then you would have to break it out. You'd have to show what county they're working in, and so that it can be easily verified which rate you should be looking at.
Right, and that's what we've been doing, is just that they vary. One county is higher than one, and one's higher than the other, so it's kind of odd. But all right, thank you.
No problem.
One other comment is that, ultimately prime contractors are responsible for their subcontractors. So if we have issues getting the subcontractors' payrolls, it's important for the prime to help us by really pushing that subcontractor to get those payrolls correct and submitted on time.
And that is correct. If you're having problems getting payrolls from a specific subcontractor, we ask that you get your ACE involved. especially if it's a chronic problem where you're not just necessarily talking about working out issues with one payroll, but you're not getting them on a regular basis, get the ACE involved. We can withhold payment from a particular sub if we continue to have problems, because and I mean that a lot of times we'll kind of catch somebody's attention when the money side comes involved. It is a requirement. If you're on a federal project, we have to get payrolls. We can't emphasize that enough. So and I say subs, that seems to be who we have more problems with. We tend to get the payrolls from the primes and able to work out a lot of the questions involved with them, but we seem to have far more problems with subs. So if you have a sub that you're not getting a response from, chances are it's probably not just your project, so make sure you're getting your ACE involved. If it becomes a chronic enough problem across multiple projects, we can actually have a sub removed from the bidders list because you're not following federal guidelines. And that's not a step that any of us want to take. We want to go ahead and solve these problems and figure out how, the department can assist with. We've got some programs that maybe we can have some assistants come in and help them figure out how to get payrolls in a timely manner. So we can get other parties involved. We just have to know that there's an issue going on and try to figure out what can be done to assist.
When Michelle says an ACE involved, she means our area construction engineers,
Yes.
just in case anybody is not clear with our vernacular that we use for our internal area construction engineers. But thanks, great response. I think we'll be able to answer the rest of the questions back in our text. So
Okay.
I guess the question was, what is exactly a timely manner?
So there's no reason why issues with payrolls, if NCDOT denotes a problem, we're going to reach out to the prime and we expect the prime to pass it on to the subs. We don't want to see the issues continue to go on from month to month. We need to be figuring out why we have differences within the next period of payroll review, and getting a response back. We realize that, payrolls they're sometimes tedious, but we've got to make sure we've got either answers to the questions or figuring out why we have differences to explain if that payroll is audited. For the department's sake, it may sound like an audit may not be a big deal, but that can have issues with our FHWA funding, raises questions during our internal audits with OIG. If the department is found at fault, there can be repercussions for the department. So it's critical that we get a grasp on the questions that are coming up with our payroll process. Any other questions? If you have any more, feel free to put them in. We will continue to answer, but if nothing else, I'm going to keep on going.
Please do. Thanks, Michelle.
All right. There's a brand new subcontractor payment tracking. If you haven't seen it, as prime contractors log in to enter their payments for subcontractors, you'll note it looks a little bit different. This change was made earlier this year, so you probably had an opportunity to play with it for a few months now, but it used to be when you logged in, you just entered your payment. Now you have the ability to view pending payments that the department hasn't necessarily approved, change needed payments, and change needed, the department has an opportunity to mark it if by chance we may notice there's a duplicate. Sometimes multiple payments get entered. So if it has the same date, same amount, same sub, we may flag it and say, this looks like it was an accident duplicate entry. Occasionally we'll have some payments that just look odd compared to our records, and we do utilize the subcontract data that we have for all subs to verify how much a sub should be paid within a specific time frame. So we are comparing it those. If it looks odd, we may ask a question. REs, if you have a question about a subcontractor and you mark it as change needed, please reach out to the prime. Let them know you have marked it as change needed. There is no automatic notification in subcontractor payment tracking. So if you mark it as change needed, they don't know unless you tell them. Primes, if you get an email that says, hey, I've marked this as change needed, please go in, please have your staff go into the change needed area and take a look at the payment. If it is correct, if it doesn't look like it's a duplicate entry, or if it is correct, you can send backup documentation on maybe why it may be different than our records show. But we do need to try to be making sure we're taking a look at the change needed payments. Used to be DOT would mark change needed if it was a non-DBE. We do not have to do that any longer, RE staff. So we can utilize the data that's entered for non-DBEs. Do want to note that all DBEs must be entered regardless if they're committed or not, though. We do expect to see all DBE payments. You have an opportunity to look at the accepted payments, and then there's contact information. The prime contractor must enter payments monthly for all DBE firms, again, regardless of if they're committed or not. It is optional for non-DBE firms. Should note that the prime contractor is the only one authorized to enter payments for the project. If by chance you have a first tier sub who's paying a second tier sub as a DBE, they have to send that information to the prime, and you'll have to enter it for them. Our system only allows the prime to log on and enter. If there is no commercially useful function, they can't get DBE participation credit. On DBE suppliers and manufacturers, our system doesn't allow us to enter those in as subcontracts. So if you can supply a copy of the DBE invoice with prices to verify how much you're reporting, and please make sure to use 60% of the supplier invoice, since 60% is how much suppliers count towards. Monitor DBE payment entries to ensure contract committed line items are being followed, not just overall subcontract amounts. We do look at the individual line items. Are they performing the quantities and unit prices? And make sure DBE goals, you know that it is a contractual requirement. Committed DBE firms, those are the ones that are submitted by the prime at bid time. They're listed in the back of the contract, must be utilized on the project. Did want to note that the questions, I guess, has come up about why we track non-committed DBE firms. That's because we have to report all of our DBE utilization, not just who's committed. We have to track, and we have an aspirational goal of 14% on federal contracts and about 11.8% on state-funded contracts. Not all that's captured as committed. We have many more DBEs who are performing work out on our project, and all of that is utilized to capture how we truly are using it in all of our DBEs. Do want to note for REs as you're entering them in high cams, we have seen some folks that if they're not committed, they put 0 in the goals amount. We do need to know how much is counting towards that the DBE is being paid. Please don't enter 0 if they are a non-committed DBE. We have to have DBE unit prices for all DBEs, committed or not. Any questions about the subcontractor payment tracking? If not, I'll keep going, and if we have any questions come up, just let me know.
Michelle, we don't have a question about that, but we did get asked to comment or to mention the wage interviews. So
Okay.
I guess that kind of backs up the payrolls. And the requirement on wage interviews is that we perform those wage interviews at least once per quarter, and that's based on the calendar year. And then we should interview at least one employee of the prime contractor, and each subcontractor should be interviewed during the life of the project. So, in other words, if you have a subcontractor that you know is only going to be there one time, it's important to get that wage interview done when he's there. Otherwise, you may miss out on getting that. But we should interview each subcontractor on the project. We should interview the prime, and we should have interviews at least once per quarter. So that doesn't mean you have to do each one of them each quarter, but you gotta at least do one. during a quarter, and you've got to make sure you get each subcontract.
That is correct. If you've got a 6-month bridge project, you'll be doing more than one within the 3-month period. So to capture all of your subs. So make sure you're staying on top of that.
And contractors, folks, if you would, just when you have meetings or whatever, make sure to pass it along to your folks down the line that we are required to do these, and it's not, it's not that we're trying to be nosy or whatever, but it's what we use to kind of verify our payroll, and it's something that we are required to do. So just I guess I ask you to educate your employees on what that process is.
That's correct.
So a follow-up question, what if subcontractors are on site multiple quarters, still only one for the life of the project? That's right. As long as you get that subcontractor once, that's fine. Now you can do it more than once, but the minimum is the one time.
That is correct. All right, for the updated joint check agreement, this form was updated in January 2019. The purpose is to assist in establishing a credit line for suppliers. The joint check agreement must be utilized for all DBE firms in which you're issuing a joint check agreement with. It's only DBE firms. The prime cannot substitute its own joint check agreement. You can have your own, but you must complete the DOT form and submit it to us. Credit should be for materials towards the DBE goal only when the DBE is performing a commercially useful function, meaning that they are negotiating the price, determining the quality and quantities, ordering the material, installing the material, and paying for the material themselves. The prime contractor acts solely as the guarantor of the suppliers to the suppliers for payment. So the joint check must actually be issued by the prime. It's got to be delivered and go through the DBE's hands to pay the suppliers. The prime contractor cannot pay the DBE directly, the suppliers directly. It has to go through the hands of the subcontractor. And that is their way of paying. You may be supplying the funds to help keep the process going, but the DBE does have to have control of that payment as it goes to the suppliers. I'm going to talk quickly about the FHWA 1391 report. We did actually just go through this report, and we should have all submittals in. I'm not necessarily going to go through all this. I do want to talk a little bit about the electronic process that we did. I'd love to know if any subcontractor or any prime contractors utilize the electronic FHWA 1391 form that was issued this year. You had the opportunity to go online, submit an electronic form, and then subsequently you had to send in the paper form as well. And that provided us the actual backup proof. The reason we couldn't go solely electronic this year, we didn't have a way for prime contractors to log on and have a unique ID for us to verify who was submitting the 1391. We are working towards that in next year. Do plan on utilizing electronic solely by the time next year comes around. So we'd love to have feedback. There is a poll that just went live. Would love to hear your answers. Did you utilize the electronic form? Did you not? Did you not know about it? So we'll let that poll stay open for a few minutes. If you have comments, we'd love feedback. You can email me at mhgaddy, G-A-D-D-Y, at ncdot.gov. Would love to get comments on your thoughts about it. For contractors, did you like the format? Was it easy? For RE staff, if you reviewed an electronic one, what did you think of it? We're going to take those comments and we'll be utilizing them to make next year's process better. So any comments, questions on joint checks or 1391s? All right.
So we're only up to 20% of our voting. So we'll give it just another minute or so. If you haven't voted, please go ahead and do so.
That's great. I'm going to go ahead and click ahead and let y'all, while y'all are finishing voting. Title VI posters. Do want to note that Title VI posters must be on site, on the job site or field office boards for federal aid and state funded projects. The Title VI, the posters, we do have a copy of it in the handout section if you need a copy. So from there, you can actually go into the handout section, download it, and have a copy of the posters. On state funded projects, you must physically incorporate Title VI and non-discrimination assurances on all tier subcontracts. Federal aid must have Title VI, non-discrimination assurances, and the FHWA 1273 included in the subcontracts. Do want to add, you can't just print it out and attach it. It must be physically incorporated into the subcontract agreement. It should include NCDOT's non-discrimination language for solicitation and your request of bids. And the RE has a checklist that they're verifying these requirements are met on those minimum of 2 or 10% of subcontracts that we get. We are looking to make sure that the language is included. Again, this Title VI posters are in the handout section. If you need copies, do need to make sure that these are being posted on your job sites. Copy of the FHWA 1273, the contractual provisions. And I did want to note that when you sign your SAFs, this language is certifying that you're attesting that you have the FHWA 1273 for federal projects, and the Title VI and non-discrimination on state and federal projects have been physically incorporated into the language of the subcontract agreement. So by signing the SAFs, even if we don't ask for it, the expectation is that this information is included in in your subcontract agreement. RE staff only, please make sure you're filling out your Title VI compliance checklist, showing that you are auditing the minimum of 2 or 10% that you're getting, and that it contains the language needed. I'm going to go ahead and move on to closing out projects. You're done. You've built a beautiful project. And DOT is going to accept it. We're done, right? And not so much. We still have to close out the project, and we've seen that this time frame seems to be taking a little bit longer, so we wanted to discuss it. Closing out projects. Once the project is accepted, the RE has to verify that all quantities have been calculated correctly, prepare the final estimate. It's double checked at the division level for accuracy, and then the final quantities letter will be sent to the contractor. Upon receipt of the final quantities, the contractor can request a closeout conference if they have any monetary or time requests that need to be discussed. When a closeout conference is requested, we do ask that you send a list of the topics so all parties are ready to discuss the needed topics. There are 3 documents that are needed in order to close out a project. We have to have an affidavit from the contractor advising that all obligations and debts arising from construction have been paid. A consent of surety on contract bonds if a bond was required. Generally on contracts that are less than $500,000, a bond is not necessarily required, although there can be special circumstances where we do. Written notice that the contractor has no request for time extension and completion date or an adjustment in compensation, or in lieu of written notice of all requests for adjustment for the final estimate, or the final claim is what we call it. If you don't have any issues, you can send us a letter that says, hey, we have no issues. There are no claim issues, and that serves as the final claim letter. If you sign an executed closeout conference form, this takes the place of the final claim letter, because you actually are signing that you're in agreement that you've been made whole during the closeout process. So how long is it currently taking us to close out projects? On C projects, average time to notify is 143 days. And the average time for us to get the closeout documents after we notify the prime contractor is 141 days. On D projects, it's a little bit better with 109 and 97. We want to get those time frames down. We want to close out our projects as quickly as possible. Why? As everyone knows, the department did go through some times where we had a little bit of a money crunch. Closing out projects allows us to take the money that may be sitting in a project and shift it to other areas. If the project doesn't close out, we can't do that because we don't know how much more money we're going to pay out. So say we've got a $2 million project and we only spent $1.5 million. You've got $500,000 sitting in a pot that can't be moved until we get all of these documents in agreement that we can close a project out. Contractors, what's your incentive for project and closing out project? If there's any money sitting there, it's just sitting there. You want your money, so, and we want to give it to you. We want to go ahead and close these things out. M&T can't certify projects until the final estimate is paid, and FHWA can't issue a final voucher. What does that mean for all of us? It means that the key date for records retention continues until FHWA issues the final voucher. We are all required to keep records for 3 years after the final voucher date. We can be audited, both NCDOT, and we can ask anything of the contractor within that 3-year period if by chance we need some documents. So closing out projects is critical for all of us. We want to go ahead and do it as quickly as possible. And we'd like to, have a quick discussion on what we can do to streamline the process, both on DOT and the contractor side. Some things that I did note: work on verification of quantities before final acceptance. After acceptance of ICT number 1 is recommended. If by chance you have an ICT 1, you've got a 6-month period where you're waiting on vegetation to be established, or getting some safety stuff finished up. That's a great time to go ahead and start looking at the pay record books, especially if you've got some inspectors with a little bit of downtime while things aren't quite running. Strive to complete the final estimate assembly within the allotted timeframes and communicate with the contractor. Go ahead and try to resolve any outstanding issues that you can prior to final acceptance. If you've got some claim issues, anything that can be go ahead and be determined, go ahead and address those. Communicate with the contractor to schedule the closeout conference when needed. Make sure you're discussing quantities during the monthly construction meeting. Verify that all quantities are up to date. Stay on top of the material certification throughout the life of the project, because material cert is a critical part there of the closeout process for M&T. For the contractor side, don't wait until you get final acceptance to ensure subcontractors have been closed out. You can actually go ahead and close out them, ask them to verify that all their quantities are correct before the final acceptance. And at that point, you can go ahead and provide their retention, which is if you are retaining 3% up to 10% on them, I'm sure they'd like to have their money. They do have to sign off on their quantities to make sure there's no final quantity discrepancies there at the end. So there's a step in there. So go ahead and have that conversation with them. Make sure they aren't missing some quantities. Request a closeout conference as soon as possible once you receive the final notice of final quantities. We realize you do have to get your subs involved to make sure that they don't have any quantity discrepancies, but or issues that they need to talk about. But we don't want it to just sit out there and linger. Ensure that all closeout documents are submitted in a timely manner, and make sure you're communicating with NCDOT. Try to resolve any outstanding issues prior to final acceptance. Making sure you're discussing quantities at each monthly construction meeting. If you see that quantities are missing, go ahead and have that conversation. And have the inspector get with the project manager to go ahead and have those conversations about getting quantities where they need to be. And ensure that your material certs are submitted throughout the life of the project. Any questions?
Not seeing any.
All right. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Brian Edwards.
Did you want to share the results of the poll? We don't think we did that.
Looks like 24% of the pollers said that they did utilize the electronic form. 39% said no, and 37% didn't know about it. So if you have any feedback for those of you that did use it, again, mhgaddy@ncdot.gov. I'd love to get your feedback, or if you want to pop something in the questions, we will see that. But again, we'd love to get comments.
All right, so Michelle, that can you go ahead to the next slide there? Let me just make sure I've got the right slide.
That's what I did want to ask. I realized I think I may have accidentally pulled up the wrong presentation, so I can pull up the correct one if needed.
That'd be fine.
This
And
is not the correct one, is it?
yeah, that looks like an older slide there. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's the older set. While she's doing that, let me pop on my webcam here.
Here, I'm going to stop showing.
And I'll just do a quick intro. So my name's Brian Edwards. I'm the electronic construction systems engineer for the department. And basically in that role, I mainly just try to help move construction forward into the world of technology. And so one of the more significant opportunities that we see in that is with electronic ticketing. And I'll go ahead and pop up a poll question, another poll question here, and it'll kind of kick us off here. But so for contractors, I guess out there, my question is: do you already have an e-ticketing vendor partnership? Just curious if you do. So we'll let that run for just a moment. Up to 11% on the vote here. Okay, looks like the rate of increase of our percent is slowing down a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and close it out. And then I'm gonna pop up a follow-up. Just, well, let's show the results here. So again, out of the about 18% responded, and those are results that we've got there. Half of them yes, 36% no. And maybe this follow-up question may not, since it seems like a lot already do have an arrangement. So the follow-up is really, if you don't, do you anticipate one, right? So again, just to take a moment to provide some feedback there. All right, so I'll go ahead and kind of step into my presentation here. So, why are we doing e-ticketing? What's the reason for it? Well, so really the biggest reason is going to be safety. So anytime we have the opportunity to eliminate kind of a point of interaction of our inspectors and these large moving trucks, I mean, we view that as a big safety win. Granted, they do still have to every now and then take a temperature of the trucks, and they're still going to have to kind of approach the truck to do that, but they don't do that for every truck. And so this we're anticipating this is going to be a significant safety advancement for us. But not only that, I mean, we do see the e-ticketing as the industry, I guess the industry trend. It's the way of the future. And so we want to be moving forward with technology, not so much to be on the the bleeding edge of technology, but we also don't want to be left behind. And so, in addition to those two things, I mean, just moving from a paper process to an electronic process should lead to efficiencies with our estimate tracking and payment, and then just anytime we can eliminate paper, it's that's a good thing. That meets our e-construction goal to eliminate paper. So as far as our specific solution, how we get there, we have some goals for that as well. Obviously, we want real-time ticket information in the field. We would like to have a vendor neutral solution. You're probably aware there's a lot of vendors out there. Ideally, we don't want to just pick a vendor and go with that and leave all these other vendors out. At the same time, we don't want to have a solution that varies from project to project, right? I mean, we want something that's standardized and consistent throughout the state. So those are, I think that's going to be a bit of a challenge there, but anyway, that's what we're hoping for, what we're aiming for, addressing all material types, asphalt, aggregate, concrete. Some vendors kind of have a focus on one versus the other, but obviously we want a solution that addresses all types. And even lastly here, we want a solution that is really kind of end to end, from the beginning of the process all the way to the end of the process. And I'm going to talk more about that in just a moment. So, Michelle, do I have the ability to advance the slides?
I think you do, but I'm happy to do it.
Okay. So a couple of challenges that we've got that we have to figure out solutions for. So IT cloud security has been a big issue that we've ran into thus far. We'll see in just a minute, but most of the e-ticketing vendors, they utilize their own e-ticket or their own, I guess, vendor cloud to be able to pass along the data. That's turned into a challenge that is pretty large, and I'll explain more about that in just a moment. The second challenge, we want more than just an electronic ticket. So again, what we want to do is from the ticket basically starts or is created all the way back at the scale at the supplier, right? And so that's when the data becomes electronic. Well, that's when really the process starts. And so we want to keep it electronic all the way, through to the point where our inspector, deals with that ticket information, and then all the way through to our payment system in HiCAMS. So that's our goal there, and that's a little bit more than just the out of the box e-ticketing. So this third challenge here that I've listed is just the risk of adding complexity to the current process. I mean, we don't want to, anytime you change a process for a technology, the automatic expectation is it's going to be better, easier, faster, right? And so we don't want to, we want to keep with that expectation. We don't want to, I guess, introduce a process that is more cumbersome or adds more complexity to our inspectors in the field. So we still have a lack of data connectivity in some areas throughout the state, and so that's obviously going to be an issue. If you don't have data connectivity, you can't get real time information in the field, and so maybe we just do physical tickets for those projects, and or maybe there's another creative solution that we come up with, but that's a challenge. Finally, finding a solution that's not disruptive or cost prohibitive to our suppliers. We know that we don't want to do something that is cumbersome to our partners, our industry partners, or cost prohibitive. So So those are some challenges that we're facing as we're trying to come up with a solution here. So our current, kind of going back to our kind of the end-to-end process, I wanted to just kind of document at least a little bit the current ticket process life cycle. And really this just starts with the point where our inspector receives that ticket, from the truck. And at that point, they're going to make some notes on that ticket, whether it's temperature or station or any other particular notes that they need to write down. They write it on the actual physical ticket. So, and then, but then, the next part of the process is actually a SharePoint procedure where at the end of the day, where we have someone's going to pull together all the tickets for that day for that particular material, upload that into SharePoint. So again, a manual process, and then carrying that on to the next step is all that information has really got to make its way into HiCams, another manual process, and ultimately to payment to the contractor. So the out-of-the-box e-ticketing really it just kind of addresses this first piece. And so so anything, I mean, again, if our goal is to take it all the way to the payment, I guess, phase, I guess, it's going to involve more than just out-of-the-box e-ticketing, and that I guess traditionally means we're going to have IT integrations and maybe even customizations and programming that's going to have to be involved to be able to carry that automation all the way through. So anyway, that's kind of but that's our goal. We think it's going to be worth it to our inspectors and our staff, to hopefully eliminate all these manual processes here. Okay, so the typical, I kind of alluded to this earlier, the typical out-of-the-box e-ticketing approach. Now, not every supplier, not every e-ticketing vendor may have this approach, but most do. We've talked to a lot of them. But basically, they will somehow integrate their system with the supplier and the scale, so that they're able to get that scale ticket information electronically, in real time, immediately, basically. And then what they do is they funnel that data to their cloud, their e-ticketing cloud. And then they would have an arrangement with a contractor, that would, have access to a particular project. I guess they would create a project on their cloud, and the contractor would have control over that project. And the contractor would actually invite an NCDOT inspector into, to have access to that particular project. And that's how that ticket information can make its way, to the inspector through the e-ticketing vendor application on a mobile device. And so that's how the inspector gets the information in real time. Now, remember what they do with the physical ticket. They have information that they need to augment, I guess, onto that ticket, right? And that's that temperature and the notes, the stationing, that type of information. Now, but look at where it's going. It's going back to this e-ticketing vendor cloud, back to this the site really where we as a department don't have any control or any contract over. We've not vetted that particular e-ticketing vendor cloud for IT security, that make sure it meets IT security requirements. And so really this has been kind of a big, I guess, stumbling block, or for lack of a better word to describe it. And there are some IT rules, some state rules that basically are, kind of restrict this from happening, at least unless it's kind of gone through a lot of formal vetting. And what I mean by that is just, that, our IT, security has to vet, the cloud, that vendor cloud, and make sure it meets all our requirements. And to be honest, what we have been told from IT is that most of them don't meet our requirements. And so that's been a challenge that we were we're still kind of wrestling with and trying to figure out how we can move forward with it. And actually what we've ended up doing is we've ended up saying, okay, well, let's come up with our own solution and not have to put our data into somebody else's cloud. Let's kind of create our own cloud and do that. And so we've worked very closely with our IT folks. It's a great team of folks that is really prioritize this with us, as something that they want to work on as well. I mean, we're looking for a solution again that takes the ticket information all the way directly to HiCAMS. In order to do that, we anticipate like a web service that we would, again, our IT folks would stand up. It's kind of like a cloud if you want to think of it like that. But our IT folks would stand up, and then either we receive that information directly from the suppliers, or we receive that information directly from like a third-party vendor, like an e-ticketing vendor. So, the challenge that we've ran into thus far, and I guess I'll just go ahead and mention it, but is that we found some difficulties in getting this information from the supplier in real time. So it looks like the information might be able to come to us in batches at maybe the end of the day or the next day, but anyway, the real time is what we're really needing. So I'll touch on that more in just a minute as well. But our IT folks have also proposed possibly creating an iPad app just for our inspectors, and that would be the way that they would present the e-ticket information to our inspectors in the field. And so that's our ideal solution. I'm not, you'll see in just a minute, we're still very, very early in the development process, and it's the path forward is not as clear as we would like at this point. But what have we been doing, I guess, over the last 6 to 8 months or so? We do have a pilot going on that has been going on since last December, and I think it's pretty much met its objective. But it was with Fleet Watcher, and we it's using the Fleet Watcher cloud, just like the slide that I just mentioned. We were putting data into that cloud. Now the way that we were able to do it is that we're running it parallel. Okay, what I mean by that is, they're still doing the physical tickets in addition to the electronic tickets. And by the way, if there's interest in piloting, and I'll mention this again in just a minute, but if there's interest in piloting a particular vendor, we're open to that. And just be aware though that we would be doing it dual. Okay, if that makes sense, we'd still be doing the physical tickets in addition to testing out the electronic method. So hopefully that makes sense. But this pilot, I think, is going very well. We've learned a lot about, I guess, the process, and it's been good. Now, these are just some examples of the electronic ticket, and then again, our daily upload into SharePoint is just just kind of a daily printout that comes directly from the e-ticketing vendor there. So in addition to the piloting, we've been reaching out to other DOTs, Alabama, Iowa, and Florida in particular. We've had some good conversations with, and we found out they're really just they're pretty much all doing out of the box e-ticketing, and that's it. So it's pretty easy for them to. I mean, if that's all we were doing, it'd be pretty easy for us to, aside from the IT challenge, it'd be pretty easy for us to just kind of get moving forward with that. But again, we want to take it further than just out of the box e-ticket, and we want to automate the entire process. And I think that is the case for some of these other DOTs as well. They're just they're just really just getting started with it. They've not, as far as the cloud issues. They've had some similarities with the cloud issues, and but each state's IT rules are just a little bit different, and they've not had to stop. I guess they've been able to at least move forward with it, and hopefully we will get to the point where that's not an issue for us as well. Internal work group that we've created. So we're meeting regularly with really just the key stakeholders that we see in the that have interest in e-ticketing, including we've reached out to some different plants and contractors, and they're a part of this team that's looking at it. And if you're interested in being a part of it, definitely let me know. Again, my contact information will be up here shortly. We provided an e-ticketing update at a recent CAPA meeting last month. So we're trying to, we want to keep communication up front and out in the open, so to speak. We understand that whatever we do is going to impact, our partners significantly, right? And so we don't want to develop a solution apart from our partners. Taking a few field trips. So we went out to, this is mainly for our IT folks to kind of get their understanding of kind of what happens in real life in the field for the various operations. But we visited a resurfacing operation. We went to an asphalt plant and kind of watched the trucks come through and the weighmaster do his thing and generate these tickets. And I think that was very helpful. Again, to understand one of the things that was, I guess, particularly noteworthy for us was that, apart from, this particular asphalt plant, all the ticket information stays on that weighmaster machine until the end of the day. And then it leaves, and goes out, I guess, into another system. But that was noteworthy because it raised some concerns about our ability to receive the real-time ticket information in our custom solution, I guess, design. So anyway, so that was good, or it was good to find that out. Where are we now in our custom solution approach? So I guess, as I was just kind of alluding to, we have ran into some obstacles or a brick wall. I'm not sure the brick wall is the best way to describe it, but we've learned enough to realize, we might need to kind of rethink our whole approach. So again, what we really need is real-time ticket information in the field. And again, remember, we don't want to just pick a vendor and go with that one vendor. And we also don't want to have a bunch of different vendors and have a totally different, solutions totally different solutions for different projects throughout the state. So, we're still trying to come up with a solution approach that will allow us to have uniformity, that will allow us to have our data in our cloud, and to still get that real-time information. So whether we get that real-time information directly from the supplier without an e-ticketing vendor, or maybe we do get that information, but it comes from an e-ticketing vendor, and it comes to our cloud. So I don't know. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Again, we've invested quite a bit of effort, and unfortunately, I don't have as much information to share with you, or not as far along as what we would hope to be. But we want to get this right. We don't want to put out something that's not well thought out and is cumbersome or cost additional significant additional monies for the industry. So So what are our next steps, I guess? I mentioned the piloting. We are open to additional piloting. If you've got a project that you want to pilot, your particular e-ticketing vendor, we're definitely open to that. Remember, it's still probably going to be, it'll be in addition to the manual or the physical ticket process. But we certainly value, the more that we can learn through the piloting, I think the better. A special provision, we've got basically our first take or so at a special provision. Probably would be tweaked a bit here and there as we learn more about our solution. But that's in the works. And if you were to ask me, okay, when are we going to go? When do we get to e-ticketing? When's the department going to require e-ticketing? We're still it's still a couple of years away, I would be my guess. So again, we don't want to rush it. But anyway, that's kind of a good overview of where we're at with the e-ticketing. I do again want to offer you to come join us if you're interested in kind of being a part of this, I guess, solution development, or if you've got a project that you want to try out your vendor. It's funny, we've had several, we've done several demos with other e-ticketing vendors, and we've thought we were going to have other pilots coming on board, and so far we've really just got the one. So, but yeah, so feel free to reach out to me if you have an interest in that. So let me pause now and see if we've got any questions on e-ticketing. Does anything come through, Brian, on the question?
We got one question about, how would it work with no cell service? And, we realize that that's a challenge that we will need to, I guess, deal with. And that's some of the discussions that we've been having is what would we do and how would we handle that?
A couple of the other states, we've reached out and asked those same questions to some other states, just curious how they're handling it. And, the feedback that we got from them was that many times the inspector can just hop in a car and drive a mile or two down the road, and then they pick up coverage, and then they would just, download, I guess, whatever e-tickets that, were in the queue that hadn't come through, and they would drive back. You guys know better than I do, at least inspectors and field staff. But, typically if you got a project that's out in the middle of nowhere, if you don't have cell coverage, you can't even make a phone call, and you'll drive somewhere to figure out the best places to go if there is indeed a place reasonably close. And you can drive there and figure out where to go to, I guess, get that coverage. And it's not a perfect solution, but it might be something that's doable.
Yeah, that's one of the possibilities. Again, this is a work in progress that we're developing, and like Brian said, in no super big rush. But those are, again, that's one of the critical things that we've been talking about and taking into account. So. We're just working through each of those and taking it slow and not trying to rush it. All right. Thank you, Brian. That was a good presentation. So that pretty much concludes our topics for today. But what we would like to do now, we've got a little bit of time. We'd like to open it up. If you want to ask a question about anything that we've covered so far, feel free to raise your hand or type it in. We do have a question. Has anyone considered a type of device or device transfer of the e-ticket similar to Apple AirDrop that could happen between the truck and the inspector's device? So I don't know that we have seen anything like that, but that if there's something out there, we would certainly entertain. We're kind of open to all options right now.
That's a good question for sure. Yeah, just getting close to it, right? Getting close to it and then be able to transfer that data. Just getting the proximity sounds good.
Anyone have any other questions, or if so, raise your hand if you want to comment or chime in. We'll gladly allow you time to do that. Just a reminder to click on the link for the PDHs, complete that survey, and get the PDH form as well. I think maybe that'll be emailed out. Is that right, Brian? Or how does that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So for the PDH, I guess, well, just filling out the form, I guess. So there should be a link. Actually, let me just see if I can present. So I've got, I know you can probably can't see my screen here, but let me do this. Let me copy this, and I'm going to send out a new chat or a new announcement.
I think I just did it.
Oh, you did it. Okay, good. So you might have two.
I stopped sharing my screen, so
Okay.
if you need to show anything, you can.
So you should have that link in the announcement.
Yeah. So
you can complete the survey and get the PDHs. And again, you get 1.5 for today, and if you come to our next 2 sessions, the next one is at the end of October. That's our general session. And so if you participate in that, you will get 1.5 more hours. So I know this year PDHs are kind of tight, so those some opportunities.
yeah, and then again, just remember, I was going to say, just remember the handout section there. It's got the documents that you'll need, including the PowerPoint for today.
Last call for any comments or questions. I'm not seeing any hands raised. All right. Well, thank you for your time today, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.